So hello and welcome. It is the 16th of December 2011. My name is Samuel William and this is Truth You Can Wake Up To. So I want to talk about one thing in this episode, and that is NanoThermite. Now I'm in my early 30s, so when 9/11 happened I was in my early 20s. And just like everybody else, I watched it on television and watched the whole thing sort of happen. Was pretty accepting of the official narrative of what happened there, that terrorists flew planes into the buildings and the buildings collapsed through to structural failure. I accepted that. I watched the documentaries that were put on about the pancake theory, and I was pretty interested in how these buildings collapsed, and I pretty much accepted that the steel failed and the buildings collapsed. Now, in the days, weeks after 9/11, I can remember going through central London. In fact, I was walking across the Millennium Bridge, which goes from St Paul's over to the Tate Modern, just on the River Thames there. And I can remember seeing some guys, with T-shirts on saying 9/11 was an inside job, and there's evidence that something other than what we were told happened. And to be honest, I thought those people were a little bit crazy. Now there's probably a seminal documentary that most people have heard about called Loose Change. Now I watched Loose Change when probably a couple of years after it came out. The first one came out, and I was interested in it. I watched it, I listened to it, but it didn't really dawn on me how important some of that information is, or whether or not it was real. It was just a good bit of entertainment that I watched. Now, it wasn't until I came across NanoThermite that I had a life-changing experience where this interesting story really hit home and became a presence. Now, we're all aware that when the Twin Towers collapsed, there were huge pyroclastic flows of dust that went everywhere. Everybody saw those. But it was down to just a couple of scientists, one being Stephen Jones, the other a scientist from a university in Holland. Now, they did a scientific paper on their analysis of the dust. The reason they analysed the dust is because the authorities that were involved in the investigation into 9/11 never analysed the dust. It is in fact a fire code. It's a legal requirement that if there's ever a fire in a building or a collapse of a building or anything like that, then you're supposed to check for evidence of accelerants, be that diesel, petrol, airplane fuel, or possibly explosives. But unfortunately that was never done in the official account. So there was a few scientists who took it upon themselves to just check, seeing as they were a little bit confused about how these buildings completely dismembered themselves all over the Manhattan area. So looking through the dust, under a microscope they found little red and grey chips. And they put it through a spectral analyzer, which tells them what kind of elements are in there, what things are making up these little red chips, and found it to be iron oxide and aluminium, which is thermite. Now this was curious enough. And for those of you who know what thermite is, I'm going to apologise, but I want to just quickly run through the science of it. Now, thermite is it's an incendiary, and the military use these incendiaries. They have them in the form of grenades, and say you've got a tank on the battlefield that you need to abandon. What the military will do is put a thermite grenade down the barrel, and it'll roll all the way down into the mechanism that fires the gun, and it'll explode. And it's not just an ordinary explosive. Thermite actually creates molten iron. So when you put that into a tank, it sort of melts all of the mechanism of the gun, making it completely inoperable. So that's thermite. And it's made up of a mixture of two different types of dust. Iron oxide, which is rust, that's FeO2. And also just aluminium powder, that's Al. Now what happens when you ignite this powder is that very simply the oxygen leaps over from the iron onto the aluminium. The aluminium turns into aluminium oxide, and that is released as a sort of white smoke. And you're left with just iron on its own, very, very hot, about 4,000 degrees. So that's thermite. But they didn't find thermite in the World Trade Center dust. They found NanoThermite. Now, the difference between thermite and nanothermite is just the way that you create it. To make normal thermite, you get a lump of rusted iron and a lump of aluminium, and you file them down, you grind them down into smaller bits, into as small as you can. And so it's just a very fine powder all mixed together. That's how you make thermite. Now, nanothermite is very different because you actually make nanothermite from the atomic scale up. So you actually get atoms of each of them, put them together. And specifically what they found in the World Trade Center dust was little red and grey chips of atomic iron oxide and aluminium mixed together in such a way as to really maximize the energy that is released when it's ignited. Now, nanothermite has been around since the early 1990s. Just a few American universities were researching it on behalf of the American military. Now, it has to be pointed out here that the available research on nanothermite done by these American universities was pretty low tech. It was made from the atomic scale, so it was definitely nanotechnology, and it was definitely better than just normal thermite, but with the added properties of releasing its energy under a smaller period of time. So the energy all comes out very, very quickly, rather than a normal thermite reaction where it's all pretty messy and quite slow. Now, the nanothermite that was discovered in the World Trade Center dust was on a whole different level. It was very, very much high technology that nobody had ever seen before. They made quite a unique discovery. So this stuff officially didn't exist. We didn't have the technology to create what they found. Yet they have it. Somebody made it, but who? So the explosion of this nanothermite is quite a lot different to any normal kind of explosion, in that it's pretty quiet. In actual fact, as the molten iron is produced, it kind of sprays out of it, almost like a fine mist. Like you've got a little water sprayer when you're spraying your plants, and kind of hisses out. Now, if you've ever gone back and watched the Twin Towers coming down, you can find some videos of they were taken by the fire department, and they were very close to it. Literally, they're sort of milling around, wondering what to do. All of a sudden, they look above them, and there's all of this dust coming out way above their heads. They start running very, very fast, and you can just hear the noise of the towers coming down. Now, I urge you to go and find one of those videos and just listen to the noise, and then think about what I've said about the hissing sound, and think about all of this stuff going off at once, and just a huge rumbling, literally sounds like an aircraft coming or something like that. So all of that evidence kind of put together leads towards the idea that this stuff was there because they found it. They certainly can't make this stuff, this nanothermite, from scratch because this is serious high technology. So these scientists have this stuff, and the evidence of how those buildings just dismembered themselves, and this huge hissing noise, and all of these things just firing out of the building sideways, it sort of lends itself to the idea that possibly there needs to be some kind of investigation as to whether or not incendiaries or bombs, explosions were used bringing those towers down. So, in a nutshell, I've tried to explain how I became alerted to the idea that some kind of higher criminality, something is going on behind the scenes in 9/11. So I hope I've piqued your interest, and if you want to have a look a bit further, I do recommend the lectures of a man called David Ray Griffin. You can find them online. He's done quite a few of them. Fantastic to listen to, concise, intelligent, and the issues he raises are very difficult to ignore. But really, one of the most important videos to watch, and you can find it on YouTube, is by AE 9/11 Truth. That's Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and their brand new video, which is called Experts Speak Out. With that, I'll bid you farewell. I've been Samuel William. This has been Truth You Can Wake Up To.